We begin this half hour at the intersection of two subjects that are all too often linked together. Guns, which it seems nearly everyone has strong feelings about, both for or against.
And suicide, which few people are even comfortable talking about. But tonight we are going to have that conversation with the help of a family who recently went through their own personal tragedy involving a suicide by gun. They
spoke with News Center Maine's Chloe Tebow. She's here now with their story. Chloe, it seems as though talk of changes in gun laws really only flares up after mass shootings.
Hey Amanda, you know it does, but here are some numbers to consider. A recent report from the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention says in 2021, 178 people died by some type of firearm in our state. Now, of those deaths, nearly 90% were suicides. It's a number some people are working to change, including a couple in Kennebec County whose lives were gutted a few years ago before they moved back to Maine.
Good afternoon, I'm Bruce Ames from Bassboro.
This is something Bruce Ames never imagined he would be doing.
We need you to pass laws to protect the people because they don't know how to protect themselves.
Testifying in Augusta in favor of stricter gun safety measures. Bruce is a registered Republican, a Navy veteran, and a lifelong hunter.
He always had a smile on his face. He was always into mischief.
Bruce is also a father, and for he and his wife Bambi, what they've been through is hard to talk about.
The devastation, I mean, it's ripped our family apart. I mean, there's a huge hole that will never be filled.
While living in Wisconsin back in 2020, Bambi and Bruce lost their youngest son, Ryan, to suicide by gun.
We heard kind of a noise and another crash. I went running upstairs and, see him on the floor and with a gun beside him. And I knew instantly he had to have gotten it from work.
That turned out to be true. 16-year-old Ryan had access to the storage room at the sporting goods store where he worked. According to a lawsuit that Ames filed, the guns in that storage room were not secured, and Ryan took one. Bambi and Bruce say it was crushing. They had worked so hard to prioritize gun safety in their own home.
All I have is hunting guns and a couple handguns for house protection. I took all the ammo and took it off site, so there was no ammo. And then we put a combination deadbolt on our door.
A deadbolt and other measures put into place because Ryan had been struggling with his mental health for a few years.
He didn't want to take his life, but he couldn't see living the way he felt for the rest of his life.
He told us one day, he said, I know I have a good life. I have good friends. We do things as a family. He has no reason to want to kill himself, but he said, I just don't want to be here.
Ryan isn't alone. The U.S. CDC reports more than 48,000 people died by suicide in the United States in 2021. That comes out to one death every 11 minutes. During this newscast alone, 2 more Americans will end their lives.
I believe deeply that suicide is mostly a preventable tragedy.
Greg Marley is the clinical director of the National Alliance on Mental Health in Maine. He says suicide attempts among teenagers are often impulsive, and adolescent, young adult males die by suicide at a rate that's 6 to 8 times higher than young females, primarily because of the methods they choose.
Have you heard from people who have attempted suicide and lived, who have talked about being happy that that was the outcome?
I have talked to so many people who've lived and said, I am so glad I made it through that dark time.
And what does that say about our society? That we value our guns more than we do our young people?
This legislative session, Representative Margaret Craven, a Democrat from Lewiston, sponsored LD 60, an act to require a 72-hour waiting period after the sale of a firearm.
We have to wait for many, many things in our life. And, if you're buying a house, you have to wait.
Craven says she brought a similar bill forward in 2007 after her neighbor lost a teenage son to suicide. In 2007 and this year, in 2023, the bills did not pass.
We need to keep this front and center to make sure that their families know that we haven't forgotten about it and it's not just prayers and thoughts,
Too many people die.
That's what members of the Maine Gun Safety Coalition are trying to do. Board Chair Camilla Shannon of Yarmouth says she wants to see change.
I think we do have a sort of a lagging cultural concern that is getting in the way of some legislators standing up for these bills.
Shannon says a new poll by Pan Atlantic Research indicates 72% of Mainers support a 72-hour waiting period. That same number also supports universal background checks. Shannon says she doesn't see gun safety as a blue versus red issue.
And the hunters I know, the hunters I work with for gun safety are some of the people most interested and most committed to keeping their guns safe because they recognize the power of the weapons. I think the polarizing nature of it, unfortunately, has a lot to do with the extreme gun lobby.
News Center Maine reached out to the gun lobby, the Maine chapter of the National Rifle Association, for an interview for this story. NRA State Director Justin Davis did not agree to an interview on camera, but he did send statements to a few of our questions. One says, suicides by any form are tragic events, often triggered by a crisis. We need to invest more in mental health and provide resources to ensure that those in desperate need have an avenue that they can reach out to in their time of need.
This board was his early years.
Since losing Ryan, Bambi and Bruce Ames have found support through the Gabby Giffords group working to end gun violence. They know they can't change the fact Ryan is gone, and they know a waiting period would not have saved his life, but they hope new gun legislation could help another family.
I think the majority of people want change, but the minority is loud.
Now, the Maine Gun Safety Coalition was backing 4 bills related to gun safety this past legislative session. Of those, only one became law. That was LD 22, an act to impede the transfer of firearms to prohibited persons. Camilla Shannon says she and the rest of the coalition members were disappointed that more measures weren't passed, but they're hopeful change is coming. Brian and Amanda, back to you.
Very important stuff, Chloe. Thank you. And if you or someone you know is feeling suicidal and you need help, there are people waiting to give you that help. There is the Maine Crisis Line at 1-888-568-1112, or you can simply dial 711.
There is also the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. That number is 988. Both will connect you to trained specialists. More of the day's news when we come back.